Hello, hello, Garland Nixon here. I am live with my friends hanging out tonight, and I'm going to do a Q&A. I see a bunch of people in the all ready to roll, so let's do a question and answer. I'm going to be looking in the chat for questions, and I'm sure we're going to have some good ones. Whatever, domestic policy, foreign policy, you name it. If you got a question, but I don't care if you ask me about Will Smith bopping Chris Rock upside the head, whatever the case. You got a question, I'm answering it. Let's talk. All righty, all righty. Well, it's time. It is time. It is about 9:25, and I try to go one. I try to go one every night now because I really enjoy it. But tonight I haven't done a Q&A before, and so I'm going to start doing some question and answers to see what you guys want to talk about, and whatever it is, whether it's something big and exciting, whether it's the end of the world or Chris Rock, you name it. So let's see who is going to have their first question. You know what? I don't necessarily want to talk about Chris Rock, but I'll make it quick since that's on everybody's lips. I'll make it quick. Here's the reality of it. I thought about that this morning. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I have my self-defense course. My martial artist trainer comes to my house actually Tuesdays mornings and Thursday mornings, and we do our 45-minute training session, right? I love it. I really have a lot of fun. And we were talking about this morning, and I thought to myself, Will Smith kind of acted like he lost it. He just went crazy and he, was out of control. And here's what I thought. That ain't true. It's not true. That's not true. That's out of control. Let me tell you when I'd have known he was out of control. If The Rock was up there, Dwayne Johnson was standing there looking twice his size, this gigantic, massive, huge muscle, and he'd have walked up and slapped him, then I'd say, yep, I got to give you credit. You lost it. And you got your butt kicked. If Jackie Chan was up there and he went up and he just slapped Jackie Chan, if Steven Seagal was up there and he slapped Steven Seagal and he got his butt beat, because that's what would happen, then I would say, I got to give you credit. You lost it. You lost it if you hit somebody that's going to beat your butt. That's losing it. If you hit somebody that's half your size, you didn't lose it. You were at minimum conscious enough, and you had enough self-preservation left to know, I'll go find somebody that's smaller than me that I can probably beat in a fight, and I'll slap that person because the level of danger is low. So if you want to convince me that you lost it and you lost control, go grab a grizzly bear. Go slap The Rock or Hulk Hogan in his prime or something like that. Go Mike Tyson stand there. Just walk up and slap him in the face. And I will say, yeah, you lost it this time, brother. And oh, whoa, did you take a beating down? But your argument that you were out of control is strong. If you are hitting someone that's half your size, that ain't much an argument. I would argue you were in control, well in control enough to know that you could bully a smaller person. All right. So let's see. We're looking for something. I'm looking for a question. That slap will be worth 50. Well, see, the thing about it is Chris Rock's rich anyway, and both of them are rich. He doesn't need to, but I mean, he just made himself look like a fool. Anytime you hit someone who's smaller than you, to me, you make yourself look weak. I remember, I played a lot of basketball in my day, and I remember a couple years ago, we're playing on the court, and one guy's playing tough, and he grabs the littlest guy on the court. Like he loses it, and he grabs the littlest guy, and I'm like, dude. The center over there, the guy that's 6'4", there was a guy that used to play with us. He was 6'4". He had a tryout for the Jets. Big dude, played basketball for Virginia Tech. He was a beast. And I was like, he played football for Virginia Tech. And I'm like, you know what? You go grab him and I'll believe you're tough. But don't grab the littlest guy on the court and pretend like you're tough. You look like a wimp. So, all right. So let's see. Are there any questions? Okay. U.S. inflation is out of hand. Will the feds raise the rates? Here's the thing about raising the rates. And that is, people believe that, here's what happens. The argument is this, that we have inflation and therefore the Fed should raise the rates to lower inflation. Well, here's the problem with that. If inflation, it depends on what inflation is caused by, right? This is an ideological belief. And the ideological belief is that inflation is always caused by demand. So if you lower the interest rate, raise the interest rate, slow up demand, it'll lower the inflation, right? Here's the problem. Our inflation isn't caused by demand. It's mostly caused by the supply chain. It's caused for a change by supply. People want to buy things, but because of supply chain problems, they can't get here fast enough. They can't get to the shelves fast enough. People can't get their hands on them. People want to why are cars so expensive? Because of lack of cars, right? Not because we've got too many cars. It's not an issue of there's all these cars and you got to slow up the economy with interest rates. No. So the fact of the matter is the discussion in neoliberal economics, the belief of neoliberal economics, right? You always have to raise the rates because you only address demand. Everything is addressed from is demand. The problems are in demand. And keep in mind something, the Federal Reserve, that's the only tool they have is interest rates. So the reality of it is this. They've raised interest rates by a tiny amount. But if they raise interest rates, it's just going to make things worse. Let me ask you this. Is raising interest rates going to get more, how's it going to address the car market? It's going to people are going to want to buy cars. Cars are more expensive. Why? Not because of a demand, but because of lack of chips. So not enough new cars are coming in. So the few that they have are expensive and people can't buy new cars. They got to buy used ones. So the value of used cars goes up. It's not because too many people want to buy cars and you got to slow up the demand for cars, which increasing the interest rates will slow up the demand for cars, make it more expensive. But that's the only tool the Fed has. The Fed can do one thing. It can raise interest rates and it can cause a recession. It can't do much else. Is the Fed going to be able to, what would affect the issue with car prices out of hand? If the car market could get more chips. Now, how could that happen? If the government of the United States would create a more stable relationship with Taiwan and China, they could work with Taiwan and China, get more chips going, stop threatening China, get more chips going, get more chips to the cars, boom, work with them, call China and contact and say, we want to sit down with you in Taiwan and figure out how we can get more chips, get them out. What do we need to do? We want to cooperate and work with you. You could get more chips out. You could get more cars into the market. It would help the economy and it would lower the price of cars. Raising interest rates ain't going to get more cars into the market. So we have a supply problem that is causing prices to go up, that is causing inflation. Now, what they're going to do is raise the rates, which will make prices go up. Well, it'll make it more expensive to buy it. So that's the bottom line. Inflation is out of hand. We're told, well, if they just raise the rates, well, that'll help inflation. It won't. It'll only make the matters worse. But in the neoliberal economic belief, the only thing you do is raise rates because you never accept that there could possibly be supply problems. Let's see if we got more questions. Dam is about to burst on Hunter Biden scandal. It'll be interesting to see. A couple of things here. If we can go conspiracy theory, let's go conspiracy theory first. And again, we need some new conspiracy theories because the ones we had all seem to have come true. So we need some new ones, maybe some that won't come true for a change. But let's talk about this one. The dam on the actual Hunter Biden story burst a long time ago. It was out there and a lot of us knew about it. Believe it or not, I reported on this thing like a couple years ago. I did a show on WPFW on my radio show in DC where I talked about Ukraine and Hunter Biden like 2 years ago, before any of this was out. It was out there, but what happened was the mainstream media either wouldn't touch it or the mainstream media attacked people, those of us who were covering it. So is it about to burst? Possible. Here's one possibility. We'll go conspiracy theory, that Joe Biden is not doing what the intelligence agencies do. Because let's not forget, there's one thing you have to keep in mind about the Hunter Biden story, and that is the FBI had the laptop. They had not the laptop, but they had the hard drive a year before it hit. So they had all that stuff. So you'd have to say to the FBI, well, if you had evidence of criminal activity for a year, why didn't you let it out? I've argued this. Joe Biden is the most compromised president in history. At this point, I got to say this. People say, is he the worst president in history? If you took the 10 worst presidents in history and added them all up and combined them, Joe Biden's worse than all of them, in my opinion. He's the worst. But at any rate, let's go one further. The Hunter Biden laptop. It's not just a Hunter Biden laptop. It's that this was a Ukraine scam. This is what we got to understand something. This is what the people, the crooks and criminals who run our the thugs and organized crime figures who run our government. This is what they do. They overthrow a country and then they go in the country and they rob it blind. There was a company called Rosemont Seneca. Who was it run by? And isn't this suspicious? It was run by Joe Biden's son, who was an addict, a severe addict, but the sad and pathetic severe addict, and John Kerry's stepson. And they're in Ukraine. Now, the United States overthrows the government of Ukraine within a month. This company that run by Joe Biden's son and John Kerry's stepson, within a month after the United States overthrew the government, inserted a government friendly to us and put Joe Biden in charge of the whole country. He was literally running the entire country, and his son and John Kerry's son, they're in Mitt Romney's kids, Pelosi's kids, they're in there. And plenty of others are in there cleaning this country out. It is the most corrupt country on earth. And these kids, the kids of the ruling elite class are in there making bargains, making deals, filling their pockets from thugs and organized crime figures. They use the word oligarchs in Ukraine. They're organized crime figures. That's what they are. So basically, Biden's kids, all of these kids are in there working with organized crime. So is anything going to happen to Hunter Biden? Well, the problem is, sometimes I don't think so, unless they just want to take Joe out because they're tired of, he's gotten to the point where that dude don't even know what's going on anymore. And they can't put Kamala Harris in charge because she never knew what was going on. So they got a person who doesn't know what's going on anymore. He wasn't that bright in the first place. And Kamala Harris is behind him and she doesn't know her nose from a hole in the ground. So I don't know what they're going to do, but it could be a way that they take Joe Biden out. And some people are like, well, they might want to do this before midterms because they're going to get crushed in the midterms. There is no they. There's no two parties. It's not like one party is going to get crushed by the other party in the midterms. There is one party. The oligarchs and the corporate owners have completely taken control. There's only one party. You've got some people who think the Democratic Party can be saved. This is the only diehard you got left. You got the idiots who are members of one of these two parties. Then you have people who are diehard who think, all we got to do is get some progressives in and we can save the Democratic Party. And then you have some other people, all we got to do is get rid of the rhinos and we can save the Republican Party. You can't save either one of them because there's not two parties. It's one party. So Hunter Biden, maybe, I don't think, but so much can come of it simply because their kids are all in there making money and it'll start pointing, the fingers will be pointing all over the place. Let me add this. The only thing that's interesting is the Russians are in Ukraine. That could really be interesting in the long run for this reason. Because they've got so much dirt from the bio labs. It'll be interesting to see when they start releasing the documents that they have. That could get ugly because they ain't playing the game. So they're going to, that could get really ugly. That's number one. Number two, and it could show how compromised the UN and the International Criminal Court is. What happens when the Russians start dropping dead evidence that the United States was violating international law and the International Criminal Court and the UN are like, oh, we ain't touching this. Okay. I think that's very interesting. And we will see where that goes. And the other thing is this. I think at some point when the Ukrainians who are in power and around and the oligarchs realize, look, this thing, the game's up, the jig is up, the Russians have taken control of this country. These people are not inured to the Washington or anybody. They just want their money and they want plenty of it. and they want to get back in Ukraine and they want to establish their economic base. They're going to be ready to bargain with the Russians. And what are they going to say? They're going to say, "Look, I tell you what, we want to get back in power. We're rich, and we want to keep doing our thing here in Ukraine. I own this steel mill. I own this business. I own this. I own that. I'll tell you what, Russians, can we continue to do it?" And the Russians are going to have power, and the Russians are going to say, "Yeah, you got anything?" And they're going to start singing. They're going to start singing, I think. I think once all this crap that there's going to be some Ukrainians fighting the Russians forever in a corrupt country like that, once they wake up and realize the Russians are in power, they're corrupt. They'll just say, "Okay, well, now the Russians are in power. How can we work with you, Russians?" And the Russians will say, "Can you give us some dirt on give us all the goods on the Americans?" And they'll say, "If the price is right, we'll do it. If you let us can keep our money and keep our businesses." And the Russians will say, "All right, what you got?" And so I think there's a lot of dirt that aims to come out of that. So let's see what else we got. Any more questions? What is the backlash against defund the police? Really, the elites know that they're going to need police for when it really comes what's going to hit the fan. Here's the bottom line. Let's talk about this for a second. In my opinion, defund the police is like the worst slogan I've ever heard in my life. And I've talked to people there, and there are a lot of people that believe they're like, "Defund the police," and I'm like, "Well, what we won't have any police." No, that's not what we mean. What we mean is we want to take some of the money that we use police and redirect it to help these communities and to address some of the other factors in our society that affect crime. And I'm like, "Well, doesn't sound unreasonable to me. Then why are you saying defund the police if you don't mean actually defund the police?" Because you know what's going to happen? People who don't like you or ideologically opposed to what you're saying are going to say, "No, they really want to defund them and have no police. And then we're all going to die." And so the whole defund the police thing is a misnomer. And I love some of the people who argue defund the police, but what I tell them is, since you don't mean really defund the police, you couldn't pick a worse slogan. That's the worst slogan I've ever heard. I know people who are like, "Well, we got to have some cops, don't we?" Yes. And when you talk to them, they're like, "Well, no, we don't mean completely unfund them. There would still be police." But, then, time out. You're saying defund the police and you don't mean defund the police. That's a bad move. So that's my position. The defund the police movement, some of the people I talk to them, I love them. And I even agree with some of the things they're saying. I just say to them, "Why do you say defund the police when that ain't what you really mean?" And so that's where we are. But let's see what we got. Raising interest makes the outstanding derivatives impossible to handle. Yeah, they got a big problem with the delivery. Here's the bottom line. They got a big problem with an economic system that's based on magic. They made this stuff up, derivatives. It's a magical formula to make up these magical economic things like derivatives and asset-backed securities that aren't really anything. And then they sell these things that aren't worth anything, and then they make money, and nobody knows what they really are because they're worthless. Again, what we're going to find is you're going to have this magical Western system of the US and London where they make up derivatives and the asset-backed securities and they sell them and nobody knows what the hell they mean. And on the other side, you're going to have another block, and you're going to have India that makes things in industry. You're going to have China that makes things in industry. You're going to have Russia that has gold and nickel and palladium and oil and gas. They have solid commodities, or they make products. That economy will be much more successful as opposed to an economy that has derivatives and asset-backed securities that the people that are selling them don't even know what the hell they are. All right, let's see what else we got. How will the commodity sanctions affect the credit default swaps? It'll expose them. It's going to expose. It's exactly what I'm saying. Think about this. Commodities, those are real things in the real world. Credit default swaps only means let me give you an example. A lot of people don't know what that means. What are we talking about? Credit default swap. Okay. Somebody sells 1,000 loans. All right. You're a bank and you get 1,000 home loans. You sold 1,000. You've got 1,000 loans, and they're bad loans. They're crappy loans. So I come along and I buy those 1,000 loans from you in a big package. But they're crappy loans. They're all going to default at some point anyway, right? People aren't going to be able to pay them. They're bad loans, but that's okay. I buy them thinking, now I'm going to make some money off of these loans. What is the credit default? if there's a default, if everybody doesn't pay on them, I lose the money. So now what do I go? I go to AIG Insurance and I say to AIG, I want to buy an insurance policy on these 1,000 home loans that I just bought, so that if they go bad, you pay them off. What does that mean? It's a swap. AIG Insurance now takes the liability. I own these 1,000 loans, but I bought an insurance policy from AIG. If the loans default, boom, they go bad. They're worth whatever, $1 billion. Just use a number. They're worth $100 million. They go bad. I call AIG and say, well, those loans all defaulted. You pay me off, and they pay me the $100 million. All it means is I take out insurance on something that I have, a package of loans, some kind of a financial tool. And then if it goes bad and the loans go bad, then AIG has now taken the liability for these loans that I have. I don't have to worry. So what do I care if they go bad? I'm going to get paid by AIG. Now in 2008, what happened to AIG? In 2008, everybody across the industry bought all of these home loans, and they were all bad. And they knew they were all bad when they sold them. They just sold as many as they could. And so now everybody out there has bad loans, and they've all bought insurance from AIG. They all defaulted at the same time. All the loans went bad. Nobody could pay them. And everybody went to AIG and said, okay, we need $1 trillion. And AIG said, I don't have it. I can't pay you for all of these bad loans. And the system was going to crash. And you know what happened? The United States government said, okay, AIG will it's called reinsurance, basically. The AIC sold an insurance policy on all of the loans in the market. The reinsurer is who they'd sell it to. Well, they didn't have to sell it. The United States government was the reinsurer. So when AIG says, I can't pay because all these loans are bad and it's just too much, the United States says, we'll pay. We'll give you the money, and we'll give everybody money, and everybody will be okay. Imagine starting a business where you could start it. It's like what the mafia does. Imagine if you started a business and you set a business up to lose money, and then you could take insurance. You know what it's equivalent of? Like the mafia, they call it a going out of business sale. You buy a bar, you set it up, and you got $250,000 in a bar. What's all said and done, you take $500,000 worth of insurance on the bar, and you burn the bar down, and you take the $500,000. You made $250 profit. That's all a credit default swap is. You buy bad loans and you take insurance out on them. And when the bad loans go bad, you collect off the insurance. Except when everybody does it, boom, the insurance company goes out of business. So will commodity sanctions affect them? Yes, because it's going to affect the market, and because people are going to be taking it. Well, not just the commodity sanctions. People can't buy things, but because there's going to be capital flight. All of these people are like, I'm getting my money out of the West. I'm getting my money out of London. I'm getting my money out of the US. They don't trust us anymore. So that's something to talk about. Let's see if we got another question. You're going to see firsthand what the dirty 30s were all about. That's right. Great reset. You will own nothing. You'll be happy. Don't need money. Any more questions? Are we on Moscow time? We're on flip out time. That's what kind of time I'm on. Flip out time. I'm ready to flip out. Anything else? I don't see any other questions. Garland, you got a lot of backlash on your Twitter for tweet that Zelensky was worth 1.6 billion. Your thoughts? No, I could care less. Doesn't matter. Next, it's getting tougher to have an intelligent, nuanced conversation about anything these days. You know what? That's a good question. That's a good conversation. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because what we are in these days is we're in a propaganda time. We're in a time of propaganda. So a nuanced and intelligent conversation is based on reality. It's both ways. It's being willing to have a conversation about things, and to have an intellectual conversation and listen to the other side, right? Somebody says something, hey, I think this country's wrong. And someone says, well, what do you have to say? An example, that's why all of the censorship is to stop an intelligent, nuanced conversation. When someone says, well, I disagree with you and I'm going to make my case, they have to shut off the alternative voices, because there is nothing but assertions to what they're saying. So when they say the Russians are losing, and you say, well, let me look around in Ukraine, and you say, let me look around. When they say, let me give you a better example. You turn on the TV and they say Russia invaded Ukraine and it was an unprovoked invasion. Unprovoked implies what? It just happened out of the blue, right? Just out of the blue, it happened. Well, the reality of that is, as you said, it's a nuanced issue. You've got to go back to 2008 when the Russians said, "Hey, if that Ukraine joining NATO is a red line." Well, that was an implication that if that you cross that red line, there's going to be a fight. You got to go back to 2014 and say, well, the U.S. was involved in a coup in Ukraine, and they replaced a pro-Russian government, at least a marginally pro-Russian government, with a pro-American government, a pro-U.S. government, with a virulently anti-Russian government, right? You got to have that conversation, and that there was a war that's been going on. That's a nuanced conversation, but propaganda-wise, you don't want that conversation. You just want to say it was an unprovoked invasion. Well, that's false, and it deserves questioning. It deserves an intelligent and intellectual conversation. And right now, because this is important, because I believe if the Americans really understood the foreign policy and the domestic policy of their government, most Americans would be aghast. Most Americans, to be quite frank, aren't monsters and beasts. If you told them the truth, they'd be aghast and they'd say, that's not what we should be doing. That's not right. So our government can't afford for people to have an intelligent conversation. They can't afford for people to understand what's going on. And therefore, they have to block intelligent conversation. That's what censorship is all about. It's about stopping people from being able to have a valid conversation about things. Great question. Let's see. Putin puppet. Yes, sir. Here we go. When will voters learn that the only reason political parties want their votes is to label them? Well, look. And the other thing is this. They want to pretend that this monstrous system we have is a democracy and has credibility. They want people to still vote, for people to still feel and believe that they're participating, that this is a participatory system. And that implies, look, if this is a democracy and if people are involved in the actual system, it implies that people have some power in their government, that people have some say so. I, for one, and I'm going to say this, I don't know it for a fact, but this is what I believe. I don't believe this is a democracy anymore, and I don't believe people have any say so in their government. So I think the government has to go out of the way in working to convince people of something. If the government is doing nothing for the people at the bottom and everything for the people at the top, if they've got this hegemonic world, control the world foreign policy, so much so that they're putting all the money into empire and nothing's going into roads and food and schools and science, forget it. This country's falling apart, hollowing out. Everything's going into this war machine, right? That being the case, then if people knew the truth, they wouldn't like that. So the political parties still maintain a veneer of democracy where there is no democracy left. And that's why they want people to participate and vote. So people, if they think they're participating in voting, they'll still believe they have a say. They don't. All right, what next? Hello, half hour late tuning in again. Let me see, we got any more questions? Does the EU realize that they've been hoodwinked? Will Russia turn the gas off? Audacity of them to say they have a contract. The colonizers never cease to amazes with their narcissistic imperialism. Okay. Well, it depends on what you mean by you say, does the EU? For instance, if you say the United States, are you talking about the Biden administration and those clowns? Or are you talking about the people in the United States? Are you talking about the people that have been propagandized and hoodwinked, or the people like the people on this show who are at minimum asking questions? That we're not just running around with a blue and yellow flag or whatever color flag ribbon, yellow ribbon around your mailbox, blue and yellow. We're not the ribbon people. That when the government tells us to do something, we don't question it. You're watching this show, you're probably questioning everything the government does, and you don't trust them with anything. Well, that's probably the wise thing to do. So the EU, the leaders of the EU don't care. Doesn't matter to them. The level of incompetence of the leadership in the EU is equal to the level of incompetence of the leadership of the United States. It's a kakistocracy, where the most incompetent and most corrupt people in the society are now in charge. That's what the United States is. That's what the EU is. So the EU, I think the people are realizing it bit by bit. I read where Emmanuel Macron now he's going around and talking to people as he runs for office, and people are screaming and cursing at him, saying we can't afford to pay these heating bills and these electric bills. You're killing us. You're killing us. That's nothing. You wait to see what the Germans do and the Northern Europeans. So I think what's interesting is the Russians are putting pressure. Look, if you're going after a coalition of people, a coalition of groups, right? And that's what NATO and the EU and the U.S. empire. Forget all of that. Let's just call it the U.S. empire has a coalition of countries, right? And the countries have to believe to belong to that coalition that they're getting some benefit out of it. Well, the EU now is getting screwed. The U.S. empire is falling apart, and it's just screwing everybody, taking and robbing everybody around it, and crushing everybody, including the EU. They're using the Ukraine. And the bodies of the Ukrainians are there to catch bullets. They're going to fight to the last Ukrainian. And now the EU, same way. What do we got to get Russia? Well, we have to destroy the EU's economy. It'll have two great things. Number one, it'll put the EU more under our thumb because they'll be desperate. Number two, we'll separate them from using the resources of Russia. We can sell them our resources, which are far more expensive, and we will extract their money. And we'll make their lives hella miserable. The problem with that is the people in the EU are going to freaking go insane. So do they realize that for those in the EU, the people that are running around saying, we hate Russians, let's outlaw the letter Z. Well, you know what? Within a couple months, they're going to wake up and say, we ain't got no bread. We're hungry. And their leaders are going to be, but yeah, you've got to suffer. You've got to go hungry, and your jobs have to go, and you've got to be thrown into recession and depression. You've got to do all this suffering because we're getting Putin. We're going to make Putin suffer, and they're going to say, but we're suffering worse than the Russians. And the U.S. is going to be, yeah, that was the plan, you idiots. Shut up. So the people who don't realize it are going to wake up and realize it. Will Russia turn the gas off? I suspect they will. I suspect they will. I suspect that the Russians are going to look. They're saying the last thing I heard was the Russians said, "Look, by the 31st, we're going to have our plan of how we're going to do this thing, and you're going to have to pay in rubles." Now, that isn't saying you got to pay in rubles by the 31st, which they may say. Or they may say, this is how it's going to happen, and you got till the 1st of May. I don't know how they're going to do it, which is my birthday, the 1st of May. I don't know how they're going to do it. But I can tell you this, that I think they mean business. I think they're going to turn away from the EU. And I think at some point, I believe at some point, the EU will wake up as their economy goes to hell, and they'll say, okay, Russians, perhaps we've made an error. Can we start working things out? And I think the Russians are going to say, no, that's all right. We're selling our stuff to the East, and you guys go on about your business. Find it any way you can. I suspect at some point, as the contracts with the EU wears out, the U.S. is going to the EU is going to pick and choose. I mean, the Russians are going to pick and choose, and the countries like Hungary and the countries that have maintained some level of friendliness with Russia, that Russia will still sell them gas and still sell them energy at a reasonable price. The rest of the EU, I think they're just going to say, you can't buy it at any price. No thanks. You hate us. You can't stand us. Go on about your business. We'll go our way. You go yours. And the EU will turn to rubble. That the EU has stuck a gun in their mouth, an economic gun in their mouth, and pulled the trigger, and that's what they're going to end up. And the U.S. is certainly happy to see that happen, so they can put them under heel again. All right, let's see what else we got. Did you see the recent headline that the American Defense League is downplaying the Nazis in Ukraine? Are there any institutions left that aren't compromised? Well, that's a Western institution, and that's a part of the U.S. It's part of the U.S. Empire. And keep in mind something. So what is the ADL? The ADL still has visions of how they want things to happen in the Middle East, of how they want the U.S.'s relationship with Israel to be, their anger towards Iran. So they don't really care about Nazis in Ukraine. They're whatever. That they could care less. They could care less. They're being exposed. They're being exposed They're like, what about Nazis in Ukraine? Ah, geez. We don't want to screw up our relationship with the people in power here because we're still trying to be belligerent um, against the Shiite countries, and we still want to maintain a closeness with the U.S. empire and the leaders of the empire. So, we'll just shut up on this when they got priorities, and pushing back against Nazis is not at the top of their priority list, obviously. All right. Everything will just be denied. People seem content with being lied to. I agree. How was Lee Stranahan doing? I heard he had a stroke. Are you still in contact with him? No, I don't. I'd heard he had a stroke, but I haven't heard anything else about that. What are your thoughts on Tulsi Gabbard? I've seen her on Fox News. Yeah, okay, let me talk about Tulsi for a little bit. A lot of things. I don't agree with Tulsi on everything. I don't agree with anybody on everything. I was a big Tulsi Gabbard fan. When Tulsi Gabbard first ran, I mean, I was a huge Tulsi Gabbard fan. In fact, let me tell you this. A lot of people know I used to be on Fox News all the time. I was on Fox regularly, and I covered the 2016 Democratic convention for a number of networks, not the least of which being Fox News. And Fox had a big tent there, and I went on some of their news programs and Fox Business News programs. And then, and this is 2016, they said, who should we watch for 2020? I know it's a long ways off, and I said Tulsi Gabbard. That's who I like. And she was still young and hadn't run anything then. So when she ran, she was very anti-imperialist. She was anti-war, and I supported her. And she's gone some conservative ways. I'm a lefty that I don't agree with, but I still like Tulsi. I don't agree with her on everything, but I like Tulsi a lot. And the big thing is she's anti-imperialist and she's anti-war for the most part. I'm not saying she's perfect there, but she's very strong with the anti-empire and anti-war stuff. And so I still like Tulsi Gabbard. She's a bit more conservative than me on some things, but based on what's available out there now, I'd take Tulsi Gabbard over a lot of that garbage right now. She's the anti-war candidate, yeah. But of course, the machine, the neoliberal, neoconservative machine has to destroy her because she has the nerve to ask questions. And the other thing about Tulsi is this. She doesn't mind talking with the left. She doesn't mind talking with the right. She doesn't mind talking with anybody. She's talks with people who are of like mind on particular things, and she's pushing back against the mainstream narrative. And so I like that a lot about Tulsi. I like Tulsi. Some areas I disagree with her on, certainly. Some areas I disagree with everybody on, but I like the fact that she pushes back against the mainstream narrative, in particular when it comes to war. All right. Let's see what else we can find. Defund the police seems to me like it was something that was cooked up in a libertarian think tank as a Trojan horse for privatization. Believe it or not, it's interesting you say that. Let me say that. The term defund the police is not, the people who push it are consider themselves black radicals, but that's not the language of the black radical, is it? That's the language of the anarchist. The anarchist is get rid of all police. And that way we can all just run around in circles and defend ourselves, right? So with no government kind of thing. So the truth is, in my opinion, the black radicals have been hoodwinked into using the rhetoric of the anarchist. And I think that's not in their best interest because people tend to be turned off by anarchist rhetoric, in my opinion. All right, let's see what else. Oh, any word on what MSM is saying about the Nazis abusing Russian soldiers? Nothing. They can't touch that. They can't even admit that they exist. So nothing. That's hit the like button. Please do that. Please hit the like button. And don't forget, I do have a Patreon page, and I'm really working on trying to build an independent news network. And I believe I'm going to get to my $100,000, and I'm going to build a network and a website, and like you've never seen before. It's going to be incredible. And as I said, I've told people mine is going to be, I'm going to try to move people off of YouTube. I'm going to utilize YouTube and Rumble and Odyssey, but I'm going to try to move people to the actual website itself and try to get people off of this government-controlled censored social media as much as possible. All right, what do we got next? Why bother listening to Peter Schiff when we have Garland? I've been on, when I used to go on Fox News years ago, I used to go on with Peter Schiff. There's a lot of things. Peter Schiff's a libertarian, and there's a lot of things libertarians I disagree with because some of their foundational beliefs are very neoliberal. The neoliberalism was based off of a bastardized version of the libertarians. So the libertarians, I've been on with him before on Fox News years ago. We're talking 2010. Yeah, Peter Schiff, familiar with him. He means well. How's that? Those that bought them, the managers made their dough. Well, okay, I must have missed something. Coop W, I heard from someone who's on MSNBC, true believer. If you even think there's Nazis in Ukraine, you're believing Kremlin propaganda. Here's the interesting thing about that. I like to be logical. Terms like disinformation, misinformation, and quote Kremlin propaganda. Let's be honest. If we are logical, if we get into philosophy and things like that, right, and we discuss what makes a conversation, something could be quote Kremlin propaganda and be 100% true. The Kremlin, the Russians could say it's sunny outside, and it could be sunny outside. The Russians have said there was biolabs. Oh my God, that's Kremlin propaganda. Maybe it is, maybe it ain't. Call it how you label it is irrelevant to me. Here's the bottom line: if I'm on MSNBC and they say that's Kremlin propaganda, I'll say fair enough. But is it true or false? That's all I want to know. I don't want to care what you label it. Kremlin propaganda. You can call it Garland propaganda. You can call it spaceman propaganda. The only thing I actually care about is it true or false? I don't care who it came from. I had a guy last week on one of my radio shows on WPFW call me, and he said, "So, I've heard your positions. How does your day job affect that?" I said, "I have a job on Sputnik." I said, "But that's irrelevant." I said, "It's irrelevant. What do you have to say about my positions? Either they're true or false. Either they're right or wrong. I could be Vladimir Putin himself. But if I say it's raining, either it's raining or it ain't. I could drop, and I said to the guy, I could drop dead before this show is over. It wouldn't matter. Either my assertions can be supported with empirical data, or at least a logical line of argumentation, or they can't. And so what happens is we've learned to label and dismiss. Well, that's right-wing propaganda, so admit it. That's Trumpian propaganda. That's MAGA propaganda. That's Antifa propaganda. That's Kremlin propaganda. Whatever the case, that's something we label and dismiss. The bottom line is either the crap's true or false. Either it can be supported with reason, empirical data, logical argumentation. It can be supported in a substantive way, or it can't. So it's Kremlin propaganda, maybe, but you think it's true or not? That's all I care about. Uh Shifted I don't know anything. Let's see. How's this next? Sherelle, please read history and the Azov Banderas connection. And it's not propaganda, it's real neo-Tunisies. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, the bottom line is this. If you want to be honest about it, if you're honest about it, the US empire's connection to Nazi Germany is truly concerning. Truly concerning, because immediately after World War II was over, the United States absorbed the Nazi empire. We got their scientists, we got their some of their the people who were running Nazi government. We brought in people who were that we brought in their spy network. All of this, we absorbed the Nazis to fight against the Soviet Union. Think about that. The Nazis are the most evil people who ever lived. And what you do, we absorbed them into our society. That's why, think about this. The governments along the borders of Russia that are very pro-US, most of those governments trace their political legacies back to the Nazi collaborators from World War II, and they get their power from the US and Canada. It's really concerning. The Nazis in Germany in Ukraine, what, 5-10% or 15%, something like that, 10% of the country. But they had an inordinate amount of political and military and economic power. Why? Because their power didn't come from the Ukrainian government. It came from the US government in Canada. The US government in Canada empowered the Nazis in Ukraine to give them much more power than their numbers should have produced. Think about that. We put a government in power in Ukraine and then loaded it with Nazis and empowered the Nazis. If you really think about that, that's pretty bad, isn't it? That's the truth. And now the United States has to censor people who tell that truth and pretend that it's a lie. Why do you need to lie? Why do you need to censor people if it ain't true? Just let them say it and then say it can't be true and I can prove it. Isn't that pretty interesting? All right. Conversation with questions and statements. I don't know. Everyone hit the like, please. Everyone hit the like button. Hit the like button. The U.S. is drowning in a sea of lies and hypocrisy. The U.S. is an empire of propaganda and lies. I'm 100%. It's 100% true. Our media, our government, it's just a sea of lies and hypocrisy and propaganda. I mean, this whole thing. Trump invaded a sovereign state. Was it sovereign? We overthrew the government. We put in our own government. So how can you say it's sovereign when you overthrew the government and you put in a puppet government and you're completely controlling the government? And it was unprovoked. Well, wait a minute. Unprovoked? There's been a war going on there since 2014. The war didn't just start on February 28th or 6th or whatever it is. Not lie after lie after lie. I don't believe that Vladimir Zelensky really has any authority whatsoever in Ukraine. You got a bunch of Nazis running around in a government that ain't going to listen to him, and you have the USA that's telling him what to do, sticking in front of green screens. I don't think that he has the agency to run it. The discussion that he's the president of Ukraine, I think, is preposterous. And the hypocrisy, we're saying, the United States says Vladimir Putin now has committed war crimes. Well, wait a minute. The United States literally had in 2003, passed a legislation called the Hague Invasion Act, which we look it up. Look up the Hague Invasion Act. It says if the International Criminal Court brings U.S. politicians or U.S. Military personnel there to be tried, the U.S. can literally invade them with do a military invasion to get them out. So, but now we're saying we want to bring somebody else before that. The NATO literally argued that if NATO does something, it's not a war crime. NATO doesn't commit war crimes. Doesn't do it. You can't try NATO or accuse them of war crimes because NATO doesn't commit war crimes. So propaganda, lies, and hypocrisy are, unbelievable. Let's see. Saudi Arabia just agreed to a ceasefire with Yemen. Thoughts? Yes, that's wonderful. I think that's good. What's going on there? I think they smell blood in the water. I think one of the things that's happening in the Middle East is they see the U.S. empire crumbling and they're making a decision and they're falling apart. We got to get our act together. We got to look out for ourselves. And they're going to climb on board with Russia and China. That's what I think. I think they also woke up enough to realize, if you're the Saudis and you got billions, hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe trillions of dollars in the London and New York banks and in Germany, and you wake up and you see them seize the sovereign wealth of Russia, you know that your money can be gone at any time and you want to get it the hell out of there as quickly as possible. So a lot of countries, the billionaires from Dubai, Saudi Arabia, all of these oil sheiks, they're like, I get my money the hell out of the West. I don't have time to be fighting with Yemen. My money has got to get out of the West. You better have my money. That's what's going on now. They are horrified. These billionaires in the Middle East are horrified that the United States empire will seize their money and keep it. And they are correct, which means they want to get the hell away from the dollar. The dollar's going to, we're so done. The dollar's going to crash. These idiots have committed economic suicide. But at any rate, so I think that's what's going on. The Middle East is making their move and they want to go hang out with China. And I can't say I blame them. Let's try another one. How does one fix a country's economy when it's circling the drain from their own self-destruction? Well, here's the thing about it. The system is unfixable. We don't have an industrial economy. We don't make things. We don't have a commodity economy. We don't produce oil or stuff like we do produce some of that kind of stuff. We know we can produce some commodities and we have some industry, not much. We can rebuild the industry, but we've got an economy with $30 trillion in debt. So do you fix that? Not easily. It's got to crash first, I think. How about let's keep going. If we're stuck on defending democracy, why do we always try to overthrow democratic elected governments? You answered your own questions. We're not. That's just a front. That's just a cover story for going around the world and doing the Hunter Biden dance on different countries, overthrowing them, and they're stealing their stuff. Look, search this. What Libya's missing a sovereign wealth fund. 2011, NATO overthrew Libya, right? They had $2.9 billion in their sovereign wealth fund in London. What happened to it? It's missing. It ain't missing. They stole the money and stuck it in their pockets. So we're not stuck on defending democracy. That's one of the many cover stories. Human rights, defending democracy, authoritarian versus democracy. It's a bunch of lies that they use to go around the world like the gangsters that they are and rob and pillage and steal. Vikings. All right. Has anyone else noticed the Russians talk peace and neos while USA supplies weapons and flames? Exactly. That the U.S. continues to do what it's done. That's what we do. making money selling weapons. They want to keep the fight going, kill as many people as they can. They want as many deaths as possible from both sides in Ukraine. They want massive slaughter in Ukraine. And I think one of these days the Ukrainians are going to wake up and figure we've been had, and I think the Europeans at some point will, probably when they're freezing cold and hungry. The USA will end up being a third world country, much like Ukraine, torn apart with racial national strife, with an oligarch running the country, much like you. I think we're already there. Yes, hit the like button. Russia tried negotiation with these hateful Ukrainians for years to no avail. Well, here's the thing. It wasn't the hateful Ukrainians they were trying to negotiate with. They knew the Ukrainians had no power. It was the hateful Americans it was our empire, our leaders. Our leaders do not represent us. They represent a few billionaires and oligarchs. They represent a hateful strategy that says they must rule the world. And that's who you can't negotiate with people who want to rob. You can't negotiate with robbers and thieves. All right, let's see. Dominion Biden is a good representation of the collapse of the decline. Absolutely. Rigged system. Our vote no longer counts. 100% right. Brother Garland, hope you're well. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. You know, the last bit of the thing I had was I had the Omicron. If you guys remember that, I had the Omicron in early January, and it wasn't all that. To be honest, it was inconvenient. I mean, I had the Omicron, and what happened was I had a cough for about a couple weeks. I had a headache for a day or so, and then by the second day, the headache was gone. The only thing I had really, the cough was a little bit of a pain. The main thing was I had fatigue. I had fatigue for about 12 days. And I mean, I only missed 2 days, 1 day, 2 days work I missed the first 2 days. And the second day I didn't have to miss. And they allowed me to work from home, of course. And so realistically, I missed 2 days work. I had Omicron. I was mostly tired though. I did a lot of laying around and sleeping for about 12 days. All right, let's see. I got the Z on my tailgate. Brother Garland, tell it like it is. Thank you, Ms. Joan of Arc. Wow, Ms. Joan of Arc says, tell it like it is. Deposit and financial institutions like banks are also contracts to make the funds available for the depositor precisely. So when Russia says we want it in rubles, we want our payment in rubles, and the EU says you broke our contract, the Russian says, I mean, really? You stole our, you robbed us? You stole my wallet, and then you're going to say you owe me $5 for that coffee that I bought that I bought for you. You owe me $2 for that coffee I bought for you 2 weeks ago. You just stole my wallet. Yeah, but you still, I mean, we had a deal. A deal is a deal. You stole my wallet. I had $10,000 in that wallet, and you want $2 back for the coffee that I bought. That ain't happening. And that's where the Russians are. The Russians are like, we want in rubles. You're breaking our contract. Am I mistaken, or did you just steal $200 billion from us? Shut up. That's where the Russians are. Spineless EU. Change that. Brainless EU. How about we go with that? Right on, Coop Z. I think so. The EU has thrown its people under the bus. Oh, haven't they? The EU. Now, remember, the leadership of the EU. The U.S., look, the U.S. is using Ukraine as bullet catchers so that this war can go on and they can be slaughtered, and the U.S. can say, yay, look at all these Ukrainians being slaughtered. Let's go get the Russians. And now they're like, oh, that ain't working. Okay, EU, you guys will starve and you'll freeze to death. You go ahead next. They're sacrificing everybody. That's what empires does. It sacrifices everybody. Now, let's not forget, Joe Biden said, look, I'm going to these sanctions are going to hurt the Russians. It's going to hurt EU. It's going to hurt our own people. In other words, screw our people too. They could care less. They could care as much about our bodies and our lives as they do about the Ukrainians. The elite ruling class that we have now is amoral. They don't care. They'll get what they want. And if they have to sacrifice our lives, who cares? What do they care? That's where we are. I hear internment camps for dissenters are not far off. We're already in them online. Eastern Ukraine has been under genocidal attack over the past 8 years by Western rule. Yep. Let's see what else. Dynamics of hypothermia just to own Putin. That'll sure end up well. Russia, China, and friends might just make us a peaceful planet. Yeah, you are quite right. Same in the Ukraine military and their families are waking up to the fact that they're being used by the U.S. and NATO. I think it's possible. I was reading something. I was watching something on Telegram and some videos, and they're interviewing a person, and these people were saying, we can thank Uncle Sam. They caused this massacre. They caused this slaughter. They caused this war. So the Ukrainians are saying that already. The Ukrainian people are already saying that already. Let's see what we got here. You think the Nazis would have learned from World War II and Russian stomped them? And how's the ADL Nazis think they are any better? The Nazis don't learn. What else do we got? No payment in rubles, no gas in Europe. Enjoy the cold. Precisely. It's a game of chicken. And the cold chicken is probably the one that's going to lose. It's a game of chicken. They got gas, you need it. You got money, they need it. And they're willing to say, we're willing to sit here without the money for a while because we can sell this gas to other people. So we're ready to survive a little bit. Let's see how you go. So that's the game of chicken. I'm going to sit on my gas and you're going to sit without your gas. We'll see who wins. I suspect the people of Europe are going to lose it. And by lose it, I mean everything they own. China, India, and Russia, the wave of the future economic. I think you're right. It feels good to have hope for our world. Well, let's hope. Germany carries the EU economy. It'll be hit hard. Oh, it won't be hit hard. It's going to be wiped out. Germany has committed, they have committed economic suicide. It's going to be so expensive. I mean, you'd be a fool right now to buy a Porsche, a BMW, a Volkswagen, a Mercedes. Why would you buy anything like that? Knowing that they're, for all we know, they may not even be able to make parts in 6 months. They may not be, the factories may be able to close down. They may not be able to get the metals that they need to make the parts. Why would you buy something like that? The price is going to go through the roof for them because they're going to be so expensive. They're not going to be able to compete with other car companies around the world. They have ended it. It's done. The days of German having a strong economy is all over, my friends. And you know what? They get what a nation of sheep deserves a government of wolves. I think people wake up in Europe, guys. This summer, I think it's going to be a long, hard summer in Europe, and I think you're right. Even Obama, because he's black, yet look what he did to the most prosperous nation in Africa. It doesn't matter. You know, Obama was just another neoliberal. You know, here's the way they do it. Here's the way neoliberalism works with its diversity, which is really tokenism. Okay, here's what we got. We got some policies that are going to screw you to the wall and give everything to the rich. And you say, well, I don't like those. Okay, we'll give it to you in a black person. Well, wait a minute. How about a trans person? But a gay person? Yeah. How about a woman who's short? Right? I'm going to give you policies that are going to eviscerate the middle class, and I'm going to try to find somebody in a different suit, in a different color, in a different something. So I can say the person that's giving that to you is something different about the person, but the policies are going to be the same. So the idea about Obama being black, white, green, gray, grizzly are irrelevant. He just delivered more neoliberal policies. All right, who we got next? Why do they seem to want to label the blue-collar factions of both parties as racist? Because that's just a game they play. You're a misogynist, racist, sexist, homophobic. That's the woke nation, the woke game. Well, the woke game doesn't say the issue of race or creed or color or sexual orientation or gender is discussed in a manner to help those people live the best life they can. It is, how can we use that issue as a wedge? How can we use that issue as a weapon to beat you the hell over the head with it? That's what it is. So wokeism is not about racism or sexism or misogyny. It's about utilizing another weapon, in this instance, a social weapon, to beat somebody the hell over the head with it. Zelensky Jewish, and he even as Nazis works with them. That's why they specifically picked him, because of his ethnicity, as a human shield. They picked him because he's an actor. Did you see, anybody see Iron Man 3, where they had that so-called terrorist guy named the Mandarin, and when Iron Man breaks in and gets to the guy, and the guy's like, oh, I'm scared, what's wrong? He's like, what? He's like, I'm just an actor. They put me in front of a screen and they tell me to read this stuff. That's Zelensky. He's an actor, and his ethnicity is something that you can use as a human shield. Our governments and who pushing for a subscription type model of vaccines. Thoughts on FDA approval of the fourth dose? At this point, it's become farcical. So I don't know what to say. Dividing people works for the man. The man, huh? How about this? Mitt Romney, what a piece of crap for what he said about her. Mitt Romney is just part of the machine. That's all he is. There's so much blood on NATO and the power brokers' hands. It's been going on for years. It's mind-boggling. Yes, that's who they are, and therein lies the hypocrisy. That's why the entire global South, South America, Latin America, we'll call them Latin America, we'll call them Africa, China, India, any place in the world, Middle East, where there's a person that's darker than Joe Biden, in going along with it because they understand they've been pounded, murdered, and oppressed for years. Nobody, no, none of the dark-skinned people around the world are going. They're all like, "Yeah, we know you guys, the American empire. We know the Joe Bidens of the world. You're going to rob us. We know the leadership of these countries, not the people. They know the leadership, and they know like we know." Where have the Antifa gone lately? They're not needed right now. African indigenous peoples had no police. The history of police is that they were first security for the wealthy. There's a lot to be said about that. How about we got this? Haven't you heard Antifa beat fascism when Biden was elected? Yeah, look, a lot of this stuff is they go in. That look, there's and now the where's the Proud Boys? Where's the Boogaloo Boys? When they need it, they'll just run a bunch of stories again and say there's Proud Boys and Boogaloo Boys, and they'll find like 11 people who belong to any of these various groups, Antifa, Proud Boys, and they'll run it so much that you'll believe that there's legion of Antifa, and the people on the other side will believe there's a billion Proud Boys, and there's like 12 of each group. 12 people. I mean, it's like nothing. Have you noticed? They literally had people believing there was millions of Antifa people and they were going to overrun the government. And then they had the other dupes watching MSNBC. Proud Boys were everywhere and they were going to come get them. They were monsters coming through the window to eat you. These are very, very small groups that don't even really, for all intents and purposes, exist other than in the minds, the fearful minds of Americans. Those words are used to beat us up. And then all of a sudden, voila, Biden wins. There's no Antifa. There's no Proud Boys. They didn't need that. They didn't need that anymore. And as it gets close to November, they'll break out the rhetoric that there's, look, where's Al-Qaeda? Where's ISIS? They gone into hibernation? No, they don't need that story anymore. And when they do, they'll start running stories 24 hours a day on Antifa, the Proud Boys, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the people that watch that stuff will start believing that they're around every corner is an ISIS, an Al-Qaeda, an Antifa, and a Proud Boys member waiting to get them, whichever one you need. I never buy that crap. But unfortunately, there are people ideologically who can be frightened into believing that there's tons of those people. And then all of a sudden, they're all gone. The stories are gone. On Fox, MSNBC, Fox is no longer saying the Antifa's out there all day long. MSNBC and CNN is no longer saying that the Proud Boys are there waiting to get you, the Boogaloo Boys, and all three of them are no longer saying that ISIS and Al-Qaeda is here. There to get you. So those are all just like Putin, Assad, Maduro, the guy that runs Kim Jong-il, just like this own whoever, just the same way. Those are just stories of boogeymen to scare you with. Stop being scared of the boogeymen. I say that. Let's see. No, that's not in the history of police, even in ancient Rome. And hit the like button, everybody. Thanks a lot. Lester says hit the like button. Ford even sold the engine to the Third Reich. Are you kidding me? Let me tell you something about Henry Ford, one of the most anti-Semitic people that ever lived. He literally bought a newspaper called the Dearborn Independent just to rail against the Jews. He was sued by a bunch of Jewish people for his anti-Semitism. He had a guy named Leopold that worked with him, who was later his assistant, who was later fingered by the FBI as a literal Nazi spy. Think about the name Leopold. He was given the Iron Cross by Hitler, which is the highest award that the Nazi government gave for a non-German citizen. Hitler had a picture of Henry Ford behind his desk. Henry Ford's his Ford dealerships around the world gave this anti-Jewish propaganda called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. They gave it out at their dealership. Henry Ford was a unbelievably pro-Nazi guy. Let's see what else we got. Will American war criminals, warmongers, and propagandists ever be hunted down to stand trial at Nuremberg too? That's a good question. I don't know. What we got here? Love the Critical Hour, Garland. Great show. Thank you. Was it The Guardian that did a real good piece on it? I don't know. There's a great book called The American Axis. People seem to be so fearful of Putin and seem blind to the fact of the Nazis. And yeah, they seem to be because they're being snookered by the mainstream media. The Guardian was just one of the outlets, who did. But yeah, it was pretty informative. I wonder if Zelensky's really in Poland. So do I. He's standing in front of a green screen somewhere. That's for sure. Right, Anthony. Thanks. Needed to go BK and reread it for details. Let's see what else we got here. This is one I'd share on Facebook. It wasn't in the middle of another month-long suspension. I always share Garland stuff. Yeah, I'm pretty much kicked off of Facebook. They use this game called Facebook Protect to throw a lot of people off Facebook. So I got to start another Facebook page. Everybody's in a month-long suspension if you go against the mainstream narrative. Steal the billionaires' money like they did to Russia, Afghanistan, Venezuela to get out of this mess. How's this? I saw a report from Time posted a year ago about Nazis in Ukraine, but we've always been at war with East Asia. Exactly. The Ukrainian troops and their families were already waking up to being used by the U.S. I think some of them are starting to. Tell you, oh, yeah, there we go. They don't trust us. I understand why Putin won't sell their oil for currencies. Yeah, exactly, that he can't use. Let's see. Let's get. Whoa, we got all kind of people. Nothing but abortion, immigration, border protection up until elections. That's it. Biden's niece is on General Motors board, of course. You would agree the politician class are only prostitutes for the elite class, remembering the four-layer power cake. Elites, number one, politicians, law enforcement, lastly, we the people. That we ain't even in the cake. We get baked. We get cooked. That's what we are. We get cooked. We're the, you know what we are? We're the firewood that they burn to keep to get the oven hot to cook the cake. The hardliners and Nazis threatened to kill him if he made peace after election. Absolutely. And the hardliners and the Nazis that would be the Biden administration. Let's see. One more. What role do you think Turkey is playing here? What more can we do? I'm from Turkey. In my 30 years of life, for the first time, this government is doing something right by keeping neutral. Yeah, they're in an interesting place because they're in NATO, but it's a Muslim, a majority Muslim-run country. Erdogan really wants to, he's very pro-Muslim Brotherhood, and he wants to be the Muslim Brotherhood kind of leader, and he actually wants to be, have a neo-Ottoman empire. I think that Turkey realizes they're on the outside looking in when it comes to NATO, really. And I think they realize they're a Muslim country and they want to go in the direction of the Middle East. They want to be part of the Middle East, part of the Arab Gulf states to some extent. I think they're smart enough to know they have to maintain some kind of relationship with Russia. A lot of money is made in Turkey from Russian tourism. They have a close relationship with Russia. They can't abandon that. So I think Turkey's trying to do what they've always done, and that where Erdogan has kind of walked that tight line, and he hasn't been good at it. So let's see what happens. He's really done some screw ups. Dems are going to get crushed this year in 2024, but I don't think they care because there's only one party. What do the oligarchs care? What do they care? Which party's in? They get everything they need regardless. So it's not a matter of the Dems win or the Republicans win anymore. It's the oligarchs so control both parties. But why do they even care? Have you ever noticed? Have you ever seen a year when there's a party that's about to get crushed and they really don't care and they're not doing anything to mitigate it? You know why? Because they don't care. There's only one party. They don't need to do anything to mitigate it. Russell Bentley and Gonzalo have been on the ground in Ukraine and report. Yes, absolutely. And there's a lot of stuff on there's a lot of places on Telegram where you can really get a lot of info on what's going on there. I heard Ritter say today or yesterday, it's a GG Russians way. And the next stage will be a bigger hammer, bloody, and more violent. I don't know. Do you believe we're going to a multipolar world? Greetings from somewhere. I think we're already in a multipolar world. I don't think we're going to a multipolar world. And the U.S. is fighting against modernity as the world has gone multipolar. And here's the example. In a unipolar world, the U.S. had the military might to do whatever they wanted and to push their will, to enforce their will on the world. Well, here's the reality. They don't have the military might to enforce their will on Russia. So it's already a multipolar world. They have to try to use their economic power. So they can't use their military power on Russia because Russia's too militarily powerful, particularly in the European theater. They don't want to go toe-to-toe with the Russian army on the European theater because they're afraid they'll lose, and they're most likely right. So instead, they're going to try to use military economic might, and that's really backfiring on them. So yes, now that they realize that in a particular theater, they don't want to go toe-to-toe with them. In the Middle East, they don't really want to go toe-to-toe with Iran. It's not that they can't do a lot of damage, but Iran can do a devastate the U.S. and can devastate the U.S. economy and the world economy in a blink of an eye with their missiles by wiping out the Saudi oil fields and the UAE and the Bahrain oil fields. They could wipe these countries flat with missiles. I mean, as far as oil, they could end really, they could close the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, they got a lot of cards to play. They got a lot of arrows in their quiver, so much so that the U.S., they're too powerful. The U.S. can't afford that fight because it would wipe out the U.S. economy, and it would put the U.S. in a bad position because those missiles could knock the hell out of U.S. bases all over the Middle East. And would that be worth it in parts of Africa? Would that be worth it for the U.S.? Could they rebuild those bases? What would the fight be worth? What are they going to do? So it's already a multipolar world because you have other countries that are militarily powerful enough that the U.S. doesn't want to tangle with them. So it's already a multipolar world. You know, militarily for starters. Now, economically, the U.S. is trying to use the economic hammer, and the U.S. doesn't have the economic hammer, and instead they're blundering and bungling their way around the economics, and they're shooting themselves not in the foot, but right between the eyes economically. So, yeah, it's already a multipolar world. We're not going to it. Let's go to the bottom and see. Iran will wipe the occupiers out of Palestine. War with Russia means war on American soil. You're probably right. The bottom line is it would mean in the immediacy, I think it would mean war. The Russians could strike militarily in the U.S. The U.S. could strike, Russia could strike military bases all over. The other thing is, I think in a time with, what do you call it? Those hypersonic missiles. Look, the U.S. has hypersonic. I mean, the Russians have hypersonic missiles that can be fired by subs, right? The U.S. has what, 12 or 14 aircraft carriers? That means 12 or 14 missiles ends them all. 12 to 14 missiles, a missile for each aircraft carrier, and not one aircraft carrier has the ability to stop a hypersonic missile. And the power of a hypersonic missile is incredible. Apparently, my understanding is that what they hit in with a hypersonic missile in Ukraine was it was an old Soviet nuclear bunker, and the Ukrainians were using it to store their military wares, their bombs and missiles and things like that. And it was under like 30 to 60 feet of rock, and the hypersonic missile crashed through it and blew it all up. That's 30 to 60 feet of rock. Why is that? The damn thing's moving, what, 10, 11,000 miles an hour. It's like an asteroid. Even if it didn't have a bomb on it, something moving at 11,000 miles an hour, it brings an incredible amount of kinetic force. Now you add an explosive to it. Do you really want your ships to be hit by something like that they have no defense from? So the reality, and the reason is for two reasons. The hypersonic missile is moving at 10,000 plus miles an hour. Secondly, it has the ability to move and do violent jerks and shakes all over the place. And the way your anti-aircraft missiles work is the radar does a formula and mathematics to predict where that missile is going to be and intercept it. But if this thing can do violent maneuvers and just before it hits, there's no way to predict where it's going to be, so it's going to hit. So does the U.S. want to get involved with that when our ships are sitting ducks everywhere and Russian submarines are all over the place? So the Russian subs could wipe our ships out and there's nothing we could do. Could we send like a ship full of reinforcement, a ship over with 50,000 soldiers or something? It wouldn't get halfway across the Atlantic before a hypersonic missile from a Russian sub would take it apart. So it's a different world we're in. The U.S. doesn't want to get involved in that world. And then what are they going to do? Fire nukes? You might as well blow. Why fire them at Russia? Why not just explode them right here and kill yourselves? Because that's what you've done. So it's a difficult position. So once again, we're in a very difficult position to be the world hegemon. Patrick Lancaster's videos are important. Yeah, I watch all of his stuff on Telegram. Telegram's really, really good. The Wizards just lost tonight. Yes, our Wizards lost. I'm happy about that. As a Wizards fan, I don't want them to win another game, and hopefully they'll get in the lottery pick and get the first pick in the draft or as high as possible. So I hope they keep losing. Good, hooray, lose Wizards. I think anything else? Kiss Taiwan goodbye. Interesting. You see, the thing about it is, I don't think China has really a need to attack Taiwan. And I think they know that the U.S. would try to bait them in. They see the U.S.'s game. I think, oops, I dropped my headsets. I think the big thing, I think, is everybody's watching what happens in Ukraine. Because if the Russians are able, number one, to win this war, which obviously they will, that's part of it. But if they are able to create a semi-stable Ukraine, what happens if they win it, right? Which they will, because I mean, sheer military power. There's no question they'll win it. But what happens if they're able to put together some kind of a government that the people are okay with, and the people are in Ukraine are starting to settle in and say, you know what, we're okay with this. That makes it very interesting, doesn't it? It makes the US's arguments that they're evil and they're just going to tear the country apart. And so we'll see what happens. Ukraine is a big one. It's because because basically the US tried to build a military base on Russia's border, and Russia came in and dashed it. And Russia asked them nicely to leave and said, "We want to do this." I mean, this is the truth. If we're honest about ourselves, Russia sent them letters and said, "Look, in writing, we would like to have some kind of a negotiations, and we have some security demands." And the U.S. said, "Drop dead." And the Russians came in with tanks, and they said, "Well, then we will enforce our own security demands. If you won't work with us, if you won't talk with us, we'll enforce them militarily." And that's what they did. We will have our security on our border either through treaty or by arms. And by arms it is, and that's reality. Like it, agree with it, don't agree, it doesn't matter. That is reality in the real world. In the real world, does a world power have the military might to enforce its will when it feels that its security demands need to be met? In this instance, the answer is yes. Russia has the military might to do it. So we'll see how this turns out. I mean, if they enforce this and they're able to, but bottom line, to me, it's already game over for the U.S. empire and NATO there. They've already really crushed NATO. What are NATO going to do? Build up on their border even some more? As the NATO and the EU and the U.S. countries fall apart economically and just continue building up on Russia's border, as their economies fall apart and their people are going to go berserk because their economies are falling apart, it's going to be a tough road to hoe for the U.S. empire and its vassal states. Putin is demonized for 20 years. They couldn't forgive him for saving his country. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, from NATO stand domination, true. I don't think a lot of Ukrainians that left are likely to go back. They were not allowed to live in the EU in such numbers previously. You're right. You're from the poorest country in the EU, and now you get to go to some of the wealthier countries. You're right. They ain't coming back. They ain't coming back. And a lot of them are bringing their questionable ideologies there, and they're going to be very disruptive to the EU countries. The people there are going to be mad. Poland, oh, Poland, you got millions of refugees in your poor country. You don't have the money to do that. So some of these countries that are poor, they're, yay, let's go. Let's take all the refugees. They're going to wake up and say, we got 1 million, 2 million refugees, 3 million refugees. What are we going to do? And millions more could be on the way. They're going to flood Europe with refugees, thanks to the U.S. and their leaders' decisions. And what are they going to do with those refugees? It will destabilize Europe. Europe is going to be destabilized. They're going to have to feed them and clothe them and take care of them. And right now they're all like, yes, we'll feed and clothe and take care of all these millions of refugees. That's going to get expensive. It's going to get real expensive. Oh, excellent show. Love the format. And I think I'm tired. Whoa, an hour and 20 minutes. That's too much for me. It's 10:43. I am tired. I will ask everybody once again. I do have my Patreon page. So please go to Garland Nixon to my Patreon, patreon.com/Garland Nixon. Does that sound right? You can find it. And we can go from there. So at least once or twice a week, I'm going to do a Q&A. Certainly appreciate everybody at Garland Nixon on Twitter, garlandin@gmail.com. And please go to my Patreon page and support me, whatever you can, $1, $5, $20, $100, $1 million, whatever you can do. I appreciate, the more the merrier, so I can get my studio built and get my gigantic media empire going. I'll be a regular I'll be the opposite of Rupert Murdoch, in that I will actually try to tell people the truth, for God's sake. Thanks a lot, Kamala V and Coop W and E. Walker and everybody. Great job. Mike Wireman, thanks a lot. Talk to you guys soon. I'm out.